Before we start getting into the title of this video, just wanted to do a little bit of an update about the actual logistics setup of the tech for this channel. Hopefully, or maybe not, you'll have noticed that for the video I do have a new microphone that I'll be using going forward. Hopefully the audio quality is better, the pops aren't as bad, just overall experience, the listening experience for all of you will be better. With that, now to the title of this particular episode. It's not okay to be edgy. What do I mean by this? Well, this whole idea for this episode came when I saw this post, actually, Clash Royale subreddit. Basically, it was a post about this person asking how to report a particular clan to Supercell, the creators of Clash Royale. And basically, clans are groups that players in the game can create, and they can basically title their clan whatever they want, and then they can put like a little description. Clans are meant to be small groups where you and your friends or with other random people you can collectively play together and do challenges and play in wars together. The important thing is, as I said, there's a title and there's a description. And in this particular post, the person was asking about how he could report this clan because the clan had a bad name. The clan had the name Gay is Bad, where gay is spelled as G4Y instead of GAY. And then in the description, they say gays, blacks, women, and Jews are bad. And yeah, I mean, this is a totally valid question, right? Because this is a despicable name and description, and just something that is not in line with the, I think, terms of service that Supercell have for Clash Royale, which is making sure the game is an inclusive place for all of the community, who, no matter who wants to play, they should be able to feel included and not feel discriminated against. And this is just a really rude and edgy thing. Now, what's interesting about this is, of course, since this is on the internet, and since this was posted on Reddit, there's a bunch of comments. And of course, since it's posted on the internet, there were a lot of people that were defending this. Not defending the action of reporting, which is definitely something that should have been done. Defending the name of the clan and saying, basically, most people were saying, why do you care? And the overall sentiment was basically saying, like, the OP is a snowflake and their feelings get hurt, and this is just an edgy joke, and it's just to get a reaction, so why are you overreacting? Basically, all of those. And the reason I wanted to make an episode today was I used to be in a very similar mindset, maybe even the same mindset as some of these people that commented in this particular thread. And my reaction is, when there's an edgy joke and stuff like that, it's just meant to be an edgy joke, right? It's a joke. And if you're actually getting offended by it and wanting to report and like get authorities involved when it's all just a joke, then I think you are, I don't know, like a snowflake. You really can't handle humor, and it's just like, I don't know. I was on the side of basically we should have all kinds of jokes be allowed. If you can't handle it, then you aren't suited to like playing video games, and maybe you should really just mute all chat messages, etc., etc. And yeah, so basically this is more in line with just in general in gaming, especially for women. Like, they receive a lot of text and verbal abuse when you're playing competitive video. And this is definitely something I've encountered like once or twice. Not as much the sexual stuff, but people on competitive video games will often resort to pejoratives and slurs to insult people, involving race and religion, like saying stuff maybe like Jew in a negative. And my mindset used to be like, okay, don't be so thin skinned, grow a thicker skin, right? And if people are saying this kind of stuff to you, the main thing that you have to do is just tough it out. Either tough it out, and if you really can't tough it out, you don't have thick enough skin, then just mute them, right? And I was like, you're kind of thinking of the mindset where it's like, if you actually put in the effort to try and get these people banned by reporting them in the game, then you are actually just so thin-skinned, and it means you're like a snowflake and you can't actually handle it, right? And I think the reason that I felt this way was when I was younger, right? I just thought being edgy was an accepted part of, I mean, when you're younger, growing up through like the teenage years, just gonna be, you're often gonna go through this kind of edgy phase. I definitely went through. And oftentimes, I don't know, it depends on the person, but the edgy phase can last for different periods of time for different people. Like some people perhaps never leave the edgy phase and they always think that edgy jokes are funny. And but I'd say most people probably go through it at some point and eventually they'll come out of it and they'll be like, yeah, edginess is funny and good to an extent, and I certainly still think that way. I think it's funny to an extent, but I think I've become, more importantly, I think I've become more aware of when edginess is funny, and it's all have to do with your audience as well. Like having edgy jokes among your personal friend group, a private environment where you know that people are first of all comfortable with the jokes that you're making, and we all think that it's funny as well. We're all, first of all, comfortable and not going to be offended by the jokes, but then we're also going to be all think it's funny as well and laugh and revel in it, right? It very much depends on the audience. And if you're just doing this in the public, not everyone is going to appreciate an edgy joke like that, because some people, they probably were edgy at some point, or maybe they were never even edgy. And even if they were edgy at some point, they probably left that phase. They don't believe those jokes are really that funny anymore. So when you're saying it in public, really, it's not funny. And if the edgy joke is not funny, then it's just edgy for no good reason. And when you're describing something as edgy, it's edgy. The description edgy means you're trying to basically elicit some kind of reaction. And it's on this borderline between what is socially acceptable and not acceptable, right? And towing the line is what makes it funny, because it's like, whoa, you almost went over, and it's kind of funny because it's such a ridiculous thing that you said, but you're saying it sarcastically because it's edgy, right? But that's if you actually appreciate the edgy joke. If you don't actually appreciate that, it's just you're towing the line and perhaps even crossing the line, and there's nothing funny. So I just think that later on, as I grew older, I used to really appreciate the edgy joke, and I still do, but I had a much more expanded audience, and I thought it was okay to always make these jokes, no matter what kind of audience you have. And my mindset was basically, it was a much more, you could say selfish or self-centered, perhaps would be a less negative connotation wise description, what I was thinking. Where the person saying the thing, you only look at their perspective and not consider the perspectives of other people. Or even if you do, you consider the person saying its perspective as the most important. Then if the person saying it just is saying it as an edgy joke, they think their own perspective is the most important, then of course it's going to be okay to them because they're only saying it as a joke. And the people who are listening hear this joke or see this joke, since their perspectives are not as important, and perhaps their perspective is that this is a bad joke and it like perpetuates bad stereotypes and just perpetuates other bad influences or stereotypes like racism, sexual stereotypes that are discriminatory against certain groups of people, then they don't think it's okay. But since their perspective is less important, then you're just gonna keep saying it anyway because you think, okay, you don't like it, but I like it, and my perspective is more important. And I think that if you don't like it, it's just because you can't handle it. You can have whatever opinion you want. And think how I've evolved is instead of having my own opinion be more important than whatever other people think, and having this very confident, because really this is a very confrontational mindset. You're basically saying it's me against you guys who don't like it, right? And right from the get-go, you guys are on the two groups of people are on opposite sides because one person likes it and the other person doesn't like it. And it seems like how you're constructing the situation is the person who said the joke, they're on one side, and the person and the people who don't like the joke, they're trying to like shut you down. That's how you interpret it. When they say that they don't like it and they object to it, you take it personally. The person who says it would probably take it personally and be like, the fact that they're voicing objection, it means that they really want me to stop, right? And if you think about this really confrontationally, then of course we're going to be defensive and be like, I think I'm as selfish creatures where we have to look for our own self-preservation. That just hardwired into us. That also means that we're going to consider our own perspectives more important, which is why I would say people that are less mature, which is often where these edgy teens come in play, they haven't quite understood yet or realized this phenomena, and they're just thinking about how they're going to naturally react if people are critical or objecting to their behaviors. They're going to think that they're right, of course, themselves. And I think maturity is part of realizing it better, at understanding your opponents or your critics' viewpoints, even if they sound not comfortable. They're not comfortable words that you. So essentially, you get to this point where as you grow older, you are becoming more receptive of these critics. So once you would say his edgy jokes, be automatically very combative against people that objected to your joke. Now, and I think this has happened to me as I've grown older, instead of automatically adopting this combative attitude, instead, you try and think, okay, we should try and be on the same team. They're objecting to what I just said, or they're critical of it, or they're just not comfortable with it. Instead of a me versus you attitude, I should be like, I want us all to still be friends. It's the us attitude. And this is kind of connected to my previous episode. You're transitioning from solely me, more of an us. And this is not just constrained to being in a relationship, a romantic relationship. This is now like applying that same concept to of a more platonic role where you're just talking with friends, or perhaps even less so with just acquaintances, but trying to get along with them. So if you don't adopt the combative attitude, and you adopt more of this understanding attitude where you want everybody to be on the same page and everybody to be comfortable with each other, then you have that kind of attitude and someone objects, what you're going to try and do is actually try and listen to their objections and try and empathize why they think that way, right? Perhaps they're part of that minority group or group of people that are targeted in whatever edgy joke you're doing, where perhaps to every other kind of group of people, they might think this joke is funny, but since the person objecting is part of the group of people that are actually the targets of the joke, and they've perhaps even received or experienced discrimination in line with what the joke talks about, then they don't think the joke is funny because they've had personal negative experiences associated directly with whatever it is you're saying. So then, of course, they're going to be uncomfortable, they're going to object, and going to be critical of what you say. So if you, as the joke teller, can then understand that by putting yourself into their shoes and understanding how the words you're saying, it can be perceived quite differently and have a very visceral and different reaction, often negative, from a different group of people, then you can understand, okay, this edgy joke is edgy, but perhaps it's not good for this audience. And it's funny with the people that are comfortable, but with people that are not comfortable with it, we should say it. And that is something that I think develops naturally as you grow older. Start thinking and empathizing with the other people, and you start shedding away the combative attitude, start trying to develop more of the us and trying to be comfortable, making sure that everybody around you that you're talking with is comfortable, not purposefully offending people and thinking that if they object, that they're just thin-skinned. Now, that is one point of view and one aspect of this post that I thought about, right? The other one that I think is perhaps more interesting, it's kind of been this where it's edgy jokes, right? The reason that they're edgy is, as I said, they're towing the line between socially acceptable, socially unacceptable. And the reason something is socially unacceptable is usually because the joke is at the expense, often in a very derogatory manner, to a particular group of people. And that's usually not socially acceptable because that falls under the common ideas of racism, sexism, or xenophobia, or any kind of those ideas where you're being very discriminatory towards one group of people. And this time it's in the form of the joke instead of in a particular behavior or anything like that, right? So with that in mind, oftentimes I also think that are not mature yet, and when you're in that like edgy phase growing up, perhaps you're staying in it when you have grown up. When you have this edgy mindset, don't believe that these ideas, these socially unacceptable things, such as racist jokes, sexual jokes, stuff like that, you think that they are very much constrained in that the joke trumps all, right? I think when you are in that edgy mindset, you're thinking that the bottom line is that this is a joke, which means that it doesn't matter if it's racist or sexist or anything like that. The bottom line is that it is comedic, which means it's okay to really say anything as long as it's comedic, right? And this is a heated debate that is now just like pervasive in today's culture war, really. There's this fight between comedians and comedy in general and the, I guess you could say, woke people, which think that certain types of jokes should not be allowed. Now, I want to be clear that I am almost always on the side of the comedian where I think it is funny, right? And funny jokes should be allowed. However, the issue in like this particular example, so let's go back to what this whole post was talking about. This person made a clan And in the Klan, they made the name gay is bad, and then gays, blacks, women, and Jews are bad, right? Perhaps to him and to his friends that appreciate his edgy humor, that kind of joke, clan name, and clan description that he did is funny, right? Because it's towing the line and it elicits a reaction, and they'll be like, haha, hey, that's a funny clan name that you did. And that's probably what the person who made this clan was thinking, right? They had positive reactions from friends or other people who saw this, and they thought that this is all a joke. Perhaps they probably don't even think about this. They don't actually believe that being gay is bad. Or maybe they really do, but then there's no excuse. But we're humoring them and thinking that perhaps deep down they actually don't think this is true and this is all supposed to be a joke, right? What I'm trying to explain is that I think having racist, sexist, or jokes that involve race and sex or any kind of like protected or particular group of people should be allowed. But the problem, especially in like a case like this, is that those jokes are allowed when you're in an audience and you're telling the joke to an audience of people that think it's funny, and the overall broader audience that is actually listening to this joke have all accepted that this is a joke, and that you are very explicitly, as you're telling the joke, also implying either through how you tell the joke, like purposely saying it in a very exaggerated way, or the fact that you're a professional comedian. So then there's always going to be the caveat that whatever you're saying is a joke and you're not actually meaning it. Whatever way it is, there's always this implicit contract or understanding that what you're saying is comedic, right? But in this particular case, right, and in a lot of these things on the internet, that is not the case, because the audience, the entire audience that is seeing this content, that is seeing this clan name, or is seeing your clan message or your edgy joke online, listening to it, they're not in this implicit contract where they're all like, I know you're joking, and we're all accepting that to focus on the comedic part. No, because when comedians do this, right, they're often either in their own like Netflix special. So if you're clicking on this, you know that they're a comedian, which means they're telling jokes. Or if you go to see a comedian live, then you know that they're a comedian, so they're telling these jokes. And then even if you're not a comedian and you're telling these jokes, it would only be acceptable if you're telling these jokes to friends or people that you know who know it's a joke and won't take it the wrong way. And then the key right there is that since they all know that it's a joke and they won't take it the wrong way, that means they're all part of this implicit contract, this implicit understanding that what you're saying is not actually what you mean. It's all for the joke. And so when you say this online, when people do things like this, they make these clans, they're doing this to the entire public. And the entire public is not in this implicit understanding. The entire public has not agreed to this implicit understanding that it is a joke. So it's not okay, because you're not saying these edgy jokes to the correct audience. And when you're not saying it to the correct audience and it's not clear that it's a joke and that you completely mean it as a joke, and you don't actually believe and you don't defend these ideas that you're perpetuating in the joke, then all that comes from it, from the people that are not in this implicit understanding, that don't know that you're, all they see is that you are perpetuating this thing, this idea that is bad, that is discriminatory, and makes fun of, at the expense of, and perhaps encourages the discrimination and just the continued suffering, I guess, like verbal suffering that is incurred by this particular group. When you're saying gay is bad, gays, blacks, Jews are bad, to this broader audience that is not part of the implicit understanding and acceptance that it is a joke, all the people see are that you are directly just saying gays are bad. They don't see the joke part. They just see that you're saying gays, blacks, women are bad. Okay? And I think what I've realized is a lot of people focus on the joke part and they don't understand the audience. As a result, they get into hot water because they think it's fine. They probably have an audience that think it's fine. But when you're saying it to the public, your audience is no longer constrained. It's the entire whole damn world. And you can't apply the same rules because now you're just saying something that's sexist, saying something that's racist, saying that something that is xenophobic or anti-Semitic. And it's just not okay. And I think the last thing that I want to talk about that came from this post was this idea that because it's a joke, and even if you understand that it's a joke, sometimes even if people understand that you were trying to at least say it's jokes can still be harmful. I think perpetuating these without oftentimes the people who say these jokes to a broader audience, perhaps they don't even consider the audience part. They know that they're saying it to the whole public. But the reason that they justify that they're saying it is that they believe their joke is inconsequential, that it doesn't actually matter. And I think the issue is when you're saying these jokes to a public audience, you think that it's inconsequential. So whatever you say is okay because there's not going to actually be any tangible effects that come from it. I think the issue is that oftentimes there is a tangible effect when you do say these jokes. And actually, let me rephrase. Oftentimes there is an effect, but it's oftentimes intangible. And that it's not that you see a particular reaction, a very apparent cause and effect that happens where the cause is the joke and the effect is something that comes because of the joke. I think it's something that's often intangible. That is perpetuation, that it's okay to say these kinds of things. And the example that I would draw from this is I often play competitive video, right? And people will often have these things called binds, where they bind a key to a particular phrase, and then that allows them to just like spam that bind. So whenever they click that key, it'll like say in the in-game chat whatever phrase they had bound to that. And oftentimes people do edgy kind of jokes or sentences or binds, right? To try and elicit reaction from the other players in the game when they say this. And oftentimes people say these and there's no real tangible effect that comes from it, right? But the more you see people do this, the more you think it's okay. And this is just a natural reaction, I think, for us as human beings, as social creatures, where we look for how the broader community of people around us, how they react. And if people react and see this and they don't actually have any visible reaction, then we'll think it's okay. Because nobody's actually verbally, audibly told me like, this isn't okay. And since this lack of reaction, oftentimes, just having it happen all the time where people are spamming this, nobody says anything, no one speaks up, that implicitly gives affirmation to the person doing it because they're like, no one's objecting to me. That means it's okay to make these edgy jokes. Then they think that this public audience of people that are not understanding or okay that it's a joke and that you're joking, they think that instead this public audience actually is a private audience where everybody is okay with it. And as a result, they then will continually think it's okay to make these kinds of jokes. When it's not, when it's a public audience and there's lots of people that would be hurt directly from this joke. Now, again, it could be that they don't care, first of all. If they're actually like racist, or they don't care, or they're super edgy and they actually don't care and they think it's like this culture war thing where the people who actually are affected or take offense to jokes, they're just thin-skinned. Well, I think and those people, it's just going to be a lot harder to convince. And I think those people are just bad people. But I think there's also the group of people who are often like young teenagers going through this edgy phase, and they say jokes that they don't actually mean. But what they don't understand is that people will actually take offense to it. And they're not always going to be verbal to it. Like, they'll see the joke and they'll internally not be okay with it, internally not be happy about it, internally feel like they were harassed in some way, right? But perhaps in their own disposition, their personality, they won't just bring it up, right? And as a result, this edgy person who doesn't quite understand the effects of what they do, they're going to see that nobody objected to it. Then and continue saying it's going to be perpetuated. And even somebody else who sees this joke, sees person A tell the joke, person B sees that there's no backlash to it. And perhaps they're also an edgy teen, and perhaps they never actually even had the idea of saying these kinds of jokes, right? But now that they see person A has said it and there's been no negative reactions, they think it's okay to now say this joke because they've observed the broader community has not reacted to it. Now the perpetuation has happened, and now even more people are saying that is where the intangible effect has occurred from saying the joke. I think this post was an interesting reflection on how I've evolved and grown up and changed kind of my view set. Because I'm sure if I did this, I saw the same post, I did a similar kind of episode where I talked about my thoughts about this just maybe like 3-4 years ago, I would have had different opinions. I would have been much more on the side of it's comedy, it's okay, go thick skin. Now, I think differently. I think these really can be harmful. It's important to understand the audience who you're talking to when you make edgy, and to make sure that the audience that you're talking to is completely okay with it. And oftentimes that means keeping it private, not having it public.